Welcome to our first installment of Phil Talks, where we will bring in multiple opportunities from employers across campus to be able to give you some insight on what employer opportunities exist for internships, full-time jobs, and overall experience. With us today is Reed Maid from the Washington Center. Reed, thanks for coming in.
Great to be here.
Appreciate it. The Washington Center is a unique opportunity, so to be able to have Reed here today to be able to give you some insight about what the Washington Center exists, the opportunities that they can create for you, but then also how the process works and a little bit about the history of the Washington Center is what we want to ask you questions about, Reed. So with that, can you give me a little information, a little background about how the Washington Center came about and a little bit of how it works with the University of Findlay?
Sure. So the Washington Center, we've been around since 1975, so about 40 years now. And we were really founded because of the idea that college students need a different alternative, a different avenue to gain professional experience before they graduate, before they start looking for professional opportunities.
Absolutely.
So it was designed to really provide a learning alternative. In fact, we were originally called the Washington Center for Learning Alternatives.
Oh, wow. Didn't know that.
Before we changed a little later on. So like I said, been around for about 40 years. We have around 50,000 alumni who've participated in a variety of programs. But our flagship program and the main offering that we present to students is an academic internship experience. It's based in Washington, D.C., and in a nutshell, the program allows students the chance to come to Washington, spend a summer or semester, so 10 or 15 weeks, depending on the term, and they intern 4 days a week, so roughly 32 to 36 hours a week at a site that's based on their professional interests. And then they also take a course one night a week. We call it an evening course. And again, that's based on their choice of a particular academic discipline. So they choose from among a number we offer each semester. And then on Fridays, the 1 day a week when they're not on their internship, they are participating in something we call the LEAD Colloquium. Stands for Leadership, Engagement, Achievement, and Development. And it's really, it's the day of the week when all of the different professional experiences that they're having while they're in Washington are really brought together. So they have opportunities to reflect with their peers. They have opportunities to hear from professionals working in their field of interest, to visit sites in DC, and we also mix in some opportunities to engage with the Washington community and also to visit places like Capitol Hill and engage civically with members of Congress. So really designed to be a holistic professional living and learning experience in Washington, DC. And you mentioned the partnership with UF. So, you know, it's a great relationship, and the way that things have been designed here at the University of Findlay really works out well for students. As a result of the arrangements and the way things are set up, students can participate in a Washington semester internship experience during an academic semester, and they're really not going to have to do anything they wouldn't normally do to enroll in classes here at UF. So they enroll in credit like they normally would, and they're receiving credit directly from the university. And then in addition to that, their costs are really the same as a semester on campus, which is really great.
And you know, you and I, we've known each other since, our first meeting in fall of 2012, so this is going on for a handful of years. And, I had the chance to visit the Washington Center in a summer and learn more about the opportunity, which tends to be more focused on the internship side. So let's talk a little bit about more than just the internship and what this opportunity can give students that, maybe we can't give them in Northwest Ohio or Ohio in general, and a little bit about, your experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm an Ohio native. I actually went to Cleveland State as an undergraduate and participated in a Washington Center program between my junior and senior year of college. So that was a really important experience for me. And having come from Ohio myself, I understand that whether you're from Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, or any one of the many small towns in between, going to a place like Washington, D.C., it's a step up from those experiences. It's a bigger city, and the wealth of experiences and perspectives that are available in Washington, it really presents a unique learning and personal and professional growth experience. It's really challenging in a lot of different ways, which is something that I really appreciated about it. So I think professional experiences are important regardless where they occur. And so I think for students at the University of Findlay, it's great if they have the chance to intern locally or anywhere in the region or the state. But I also think that there's a unique opportunity with something like this to really be challenged, to be taken outside your comfort zone a little bit, and to push yourself when you go to a place like Washington, where you may still be working in a field that's very comfortable to you, maybe very similar to what you're studying on campus, and maybe you've interned in a similar capacity elsewhere in the past. but just by virtue of being in a place where there are so many people from many different locations, domestic and international, I think it really challenges your perspective and helps you learn a lot about yourself. A major growth experience in that way.
No, I agree 100%. And when we have students come back from the Washington Center, that's what we hear a lot of, that the experience itself of being in DC and doing something that, again, outside of their comfort zone is where the learning experiences can really come. So
Yeah, absolutely.
So our evolution of this relationship with the University of Findlay and the Washington Center has come a long way, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Traditionally, most students here on campus, might think of it as more criminal justice, political science, those sort of opportunities, being it's in DC and that's what they relate to.
Right.
So let's talk more about the expansion of that to other majors on campus and how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are definitely a great place for political science majors, for criminal justice majors, folks interested in international relations or those sorts of fields. But Washington is really, I think there's a myth that it might not be the right place for a business major or someone interested in the private sector, for instance. And really, DC has become a hotbed for a lot of those sorts of opportunities. It's a very entrepreneurial city, and there are a lot of unique opportunities for students in all fields. So whether you're interested in the arts, in business, like we mentioned, perhaps in working in law, lots of law firms in DC, lots of opportunities like that. And also, one thing I would think is important to point out is that with all of the different issues that people care about that are present in Washington, advocacy groups, there's an advocacy group for just about every issue you can think of. And so really, no matter what your interest area is on campus, no matter what your major is, you can probably find an opportunity in Washington to put that investment in an issue that you have into practice and really make an impact in that area in person. So that's really great. And regardless, even if you're not, I think even people who aren't necessarily politically inclined think, well, maybe I wouldn't like being in DC because it's a really political city. But the truth is that there are plenty of people there who they're not there at all because of politics. They're there because it's a vibrant city with a lot of unique cultural aspects, with a lot of people from different places who bring their own backgrounds and experiences to the table and really provide for a very flavorful social existence. Lots of opportunities to get to know different people, different backgrounds, and those sorts of things.
So it may be a little different than Northwest Ohio?
Just a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that you experienced the Washington Center as an undergrad student. We've had a number of students go through the program here on campus, so we'll talk a little bit about that. But I want to know more about your personal experience in the Washington Center and how that kind of led you to obviously not working at the Washington Center, but that personal growth internally and the skills that you brought from that.
Sure. Yeah, well, I feel a bit dated when I talk about my experience now because some aspects of it have evolved. So I went through during the summer 2010, which was almost 6 years ago now.
Yeah, almost.
Which does start to make you feel like your
we
clock
won't
is.
say that when I did my experience because that'll really date me. But yeah, go ahead.
It makes me feel better, so I appreciate that. But let's see. I lived. The Washington Center now, we own and operate our own residential facility. So one of the big differences that I always think about when I compare current experiences to my own is that at that time I lived in suburban Maryland because we were at that time facilitating leases with apartment buildings for students, and now many of our students live in a building that we own and operate. So that's very different. But my experience was really great. I really loved my internship. I interned with a small advocacy group called Financial Executives International. They are actually they no longer have a DC division. They're headquartered in New Jersey, and they no longer have that division now, which again is part of what dates my experience a bit. But it was a really unique opportunity. I was originally interested in working on Capitol Hill, wanted that congressional experience, and actually my placement advisor suggested to me that I might have a greater opportunity to make an impact in the office I worked in if I didn't go with a Hill office and rather went with an advocacy group that was not on the Hill directly. So
good advice.
Federally related, but not necessarily in a member's office. And I really did feel like that came to fruition. Worked with some great people. It was a small office, only 7 of us, including one other intern, and I got to do a lot. So I really enjoyed that. I also loved my course at the time was called Presidential Leadership, and loved my professor. It was a really, really great class. It was a little different than a lot of what I'd had at Cleveland State, which is my alma mater, and so I really enjoyed the chance to take that course, and the overall experience of living in DC is really great. I mentioned the housing before, and the housing has improved, even more so than when I was a student. But the living experience and just the chance to be in this really great city and meet so many awesome people from many different places was really unique. So I really loved that, and I think that continues to be, even though it's not an official part of our program or something that we can necessarily facilitate, that social experience and the networking opportunities, I think that continues to be one of the greatest takeaway opportunities for participants.
Sure, and talking about a specific experience, Thomas Somrak was just at the Washington Center this past semester. Not your traditional Washington Center experience.
Right, yeah.
So we can talk a little bit about, where he went, a little bit about his experience, just so that, the other students can be aware that, again, this isn't for just criminal justice, poli-sci, those sort of majors. So.
Right. Well, and I ran into Tom at the job fair earlier today, and he came back from D.C. just a couple months ago, and sounds like, by all accounts, had a really tremendous experience. Yep. So Tom's an animal science major, which for the Washington Center is definitely a little different.
Yeah.
We see a lot of majors, but animal science is a little more unique, and so that's one of those opportunities where I think you have a lot of opportunity for relatable experiences, but it might be a little harder to actually have the chance to work with livestock in DC, which coming to Findlay is one of the challenging parts of some of my conversations because of a lot of folks who are invested in those sorts of opportunities. And so Tom was at it's the National Farmers Union, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And seemed to have a really great experience, worked a lot on policy, but on issues that really mattered to him as someone who grew up on a farm and has, comes from a farming family, to be able to really work on those issues and see how the political sausage is made, as it were. Correct.
And when it comes to that, there is, an article on the front page of, the University of Findlay's website to talk about Tom's experience. So if students want to learn more about what he did and how his relationships that were built, his experience, they can obviously go there. But, when I read the article, one of the things that kind of I pinned out or I took from that article was he talked about the experience himself, but what he took away from that was getting outside of his comfort zone.
Right.
And we see that a lot of times with students, that it's difficult at times to do that. But I believe that what the Washington Center can offer outside of the internship and the experience itself is allowing students to get outside their comfort zone.
Yeah.
So what would be your piece of advice, knowing you went through it, you're exposed to it daily, when it comes to that side, and maybe students be a little bit apprehensive about going to that and getting outside of their comfort zone, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I think within reason, within the limits of ethical and legal decisions, you have to be willing to say yes to the opportunities that come your way. I think that makes a real big difference. I think that Tom's a good example of that. He might not have thought of DC as the ideal place for someone who's really interested in farming and agriculture and livestock, but it made a great fit for him because they found the right internship placement for him. And I think that that's true for a lot of people. Even if once you get past the internship itself, there are lots and lots of opportunities that come up in the course of a 10 or 15-week semester. And saying yes to as many of those opportunities as possible, again, opportunities that you feel comfortable with and feel will be positive for you, can be really great. And so I think saying yes and being open-minded really make a huge difference.
You never have too much experience, right?
That's right.
And that's what employers are really looking for at the end of the day.
Absolutely, yeah. I think more and more often it's a bachelor's degree is a really important credential when you're applying for jobs, but it's a credential, and it's not necessarily the icing on the cake or what's going to get you an interview. If you're applying for a job and 100 other people are applying for the same job and you all have the same basic qualifications, then the added value you can bring to a position and what you have on your resume someone else doesn't, that's what really makes the difference. And I think internship experience is especially a really substantive experience, and an experience that might be different than something someone else has had can really help you jump off the page.
So the last thing I want to kind of touch base with before we get to questions and take a little break, though, you mentioned 50,000 alumni.
Yep.
So that's a large network.
Right.
That then these students have the access to tap into, correct?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe programs that are developed through the Washington Center to allow past students to be involved with current ones and vice versa?
Sure. This is one of the things that we're working really hard on, trying to leverage that network. As an organization that just had its 40th birthday, we recognize that one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we're connecting people who came through the program in the 1970s and 80s to people who've been coming through the program in the last 5 or 10 years.
Absolutely.
And so, events like that range from some regional sort of associations of our alumni in places like New York and Chicago and Boston to annual get-togethers in Washington, D.C. for current alum, to some attempts to try and bring people together digitally. So we've got an alumni LinkedIn group where our alum are able to connect, share job postings, career advice, different opportunities like that. And we're also trying really hard to integrate alumni into the current interns experience. So create more mentorship and networking opportunities within the network, because like you said, it's become a pretty substantial network. It spans around the world. We've got alumni in lots of different places, and it really creates a unique opportunity for students to for current students to connect with folks who've been in their shoes and are looking to offer the next person that sort of leg up. And in addition to that, to offer the opportunity to alum of the program to connect with other alum and facilitate connections that way. And
what better resource than people that are out there doing possibly what it is that you want to do, right?
Yeah, and I think DC itself is a city that's very fond of networking, but I think a lot of people understand that at some point along the way somebody helped them. And so there's an intrinsic desire to pass on that kind of support to the next generation, or the next student who comes from a school that similar to the school you went to, or maybe the same school you went to, and you want to be able to make those connections. And so we're doing everything we can to make those connections as well.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Anything else you want to add before we start taking some questions?
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing some questions and maybe touching on a few more.
Yeah, we definitely have some other things we want to touch base on.
Folks have questions about.
Allow the information that we have to be able to get to the students so that they're more aware about opportunities that exist very similar or something unique like the Washington Center. So,
absolutely.
Thanks, Reed. We're going to take a little break, and we'll come back with questions.
So they say it's a man's world? Well, I don't see anybody's name on it. While they were out doing their thing, we slowly changed all that. We changed all that! Today, women can do anything men can do. And there's one thing we're even better at.
It takes less than 1 minute to find out if you may have prediabetes. You can do it here. But you probably won't. You're busy. Kids, work, show coming back in 48 seconds. So let's do this now. Hold up one finger if you're a man, women, 0. 3 more fingers if you're over 60, 2 over 50, 1 over 40. If you're not sure, keep in mind you're sitting on a couch right now, so 1 more finger if you're not very active. 1 finger if yes, 0 if no. 1 yes, 0 no. Next, find the body type that looks most like you and hold up that many fingers while I look around awkwardly. And that's it. If you're holding up 5 fingers or more, you probably have prediabetes. Sorry to be so blunt, but hey, you're busy. Just go to the site.
Welcome back. And we have Reed May with us from the Washington Center. Gave us some great insight about the program, the history of the Washington Center, and the unique partnership that we have on campus. We're going to take some questions now that we hear often about students and what they are looking for, and questions about how to get the process started if they are interested in the Washington Center. So, Reed, if we have a student that hears us today or has talked to you,
sure,
what do you suggest them do to start this entire process?
Well, a couple of different things. Certainly taking a look at some of the materials that maybe they received while I was on campus, or at the very least, hopping on the website, seeing if they have any questions about the basics of the program. That's a great place to start. And they can always feel free to reach out to the folks at the Washington Center to talk about some of the specifics of the program, and then we can answer any questions they might have. But I think in addition to that, a really important place to start, especially if you're thinking you would seriously like to consider participating from the University of Findlay is to meet with you, Phil, and to talk a little bit about some of the logistical aspects of participating, whether it's cost and setting things up with financial aid or arranging credit, which can fluctuate depending on someone's specific academic track. I think all those things are a great place to start. And Phil, you obviously can also answer questions about the program. And
yeah, so I'm the liaison from the University of Findlay to the Washington Center, and if students do have questions when Reed leaves tomorrow, they can definitely email them to me, and we can set up a time to talk. Because the University of Findlay's partnership, like we talked about, is a little unique. And to allow them to go during the academic year to work with financial aid and their coursework and those sort of things is definitely something we require them to do before they can apply. So.
Right, and it's always a good place to start to make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row before you begin applying to go off campus.
So in terms of the actual internship itself, so I get a lot of questions about, are they paid? How do you even find the internship? We talk about that it is matched with you. Let's talk and answer those questions that we normally get about the internship itself, being that's the major component of when they're in DC.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so soon after applying to and being accepted by the Washington Center, you'd enter something called the internship matching process. And so at that point, you're working with someone we call an internship advisor, but this person is really your point of contact throughout the entire pre-arrival process before coming to the Washington Center. And that person has an initial conversation with a student to sort of expound on some of the desires expressed in an application, to talk about the student's resume, their written materials, and get a little bit better sense of what exactly it is they'd like to do when they come out to DC. And then as we move on from those conversations, our entire internship site relations team works together to take sites and job descriptions and match that up with students and areas of interest as they've been expressed. And we make deliberate matches as best we can, pairing students with sites. We make direct referrals then, which means that a student's materials go directly to an internship site. And from there, it's really up to the site and the student to have a conversation if there's mutual interest. And then ultimately, any offers that are extended to a student are at his or her discretion to accept based on interest and fit and making sure that it's the right opportunity.
So are some of these internships paid?
It's a tough environment in DC for paid internships. It's definitely an unpaid internship environment generally, but we do see a number of opportunities that come with a stipend for, say, transit or a little bit of extra support that way. So in most cases, students aren't going to receive a paycheck from the internship site itself. But one of the important things to remember is that because they're participating as a student, it's really an academic experience, and it should really be thought of as an academic experience from the outset. Students are enrolling for credit, and they're paying the way they would normally pay for school. They're really just paying for credit, and then the University of Findlay is arranging this experience in Washington. So that's really facilitating an academic experience, and it's unpaid internship, but still a really high quality academic experience in that sense.
So talking about the internship, and you talked about the matching that you go through. So does a student actually interview once they get to the point, or is it more they get matched with those opportunities and they kind of pick from there?
So they'll get, when I say match, that's probably a little bit more of our internal lingo, but what we're really doing is we're saying, okay, this site and this student seem to be a fit based on everything we understand about each of them, and so then we'll send the materials along. And then most internship sites, if they're interested in a student, they're going to actually reach out to have a conversation. So there will be some form of interview, depending on the site. It might be on the phone, it might be via Skype, because they understand obviously that our students are coming from all sorts of different places. But then students will have the opportunity to directly consider an offer. So even if there weren't a formal interview for a position, even if a site weren't interested in an interview, they would still give the student an opportunity to consider an offer. So you're never arbitrarily assigned an internship. It's always something that's ultimately in your control.
So again, towards the internship and getting admitted into the Washington Center, what sort of requirements do the students need to have in order to get to that point?
Sure. Well, the requirements are pretty straightforward. We ask that students have at least sophomore standing at their institution. We ask that they have a 2.75 GPA. And now, if you're a student thinking about applying and you're below 2.75, you can still apply. We'll just ask that you include a third letter of recommendation when we would normally ask for 2. And then in addition to that, you need to be 18 years old, and the big one, you need to have approval of the campus liaison, which is you in this case, Phil. So
yeah, and we have our own semi-requirements where we provide a checklist for students to be able to make sure that they have very specific conversations, again, with financial aid, with their academic advisor, because the last thing we want to do, is have a student want to go to the Washington Center, and then it either delays their graduation or puts them behind in credits, or those sort of things. So we require them to meet with myself, have a conversation with the advisor, and those sort of things as well. Because what we don't want to have is them have an idea of what maybe it is to go to the Washington Center, and then they come back and maybe it wasn't that experience. So.
Right, and I think that's a great way to sort of establish the foundation before an experience takes off.
Students that do this during the academic year, obviously the credits and everything that are coming from the University of Findlay makes them be able to do this without much extended cost. But what is the cost to the Washington Center when you look at it from a semester, maybe the summer, if students are interested in that?
So students who want to participate over the summer are certainly going to see a little bit of a different financial situation because they wouldn't normally be enrolled in courses at the university.
Now financial aid won't help them.
Right,
like
and so depending on how far in advance they're planning and in exactly what their personal situation looks like, sometimes financial aid officers can creatively help to stretch things into different parts of the year, which can be really helpful in those cases. But in addition to that, there is some private Washington Center aid available to help offset the cost, and notably and importantly, we have a great relationship with the state of Ohio, through which there's some direct funding available to offset the cost of housing when students are in DC. So normally, the housing awards for students from the state of Ohio are $2,300, and that's directly off of the invoice. It's again through that state partnership. This summer, we're offering $4,000 scholarships.
Oh, wow.
That again come directly off the housing invoice. So that really does almost covers the entire cost of summer housing. So that really decreases the cost disparity that a student might be seeing, and makes it again affordable when you consider what they would normally see as a bill on campus. And they're still, even in the summer, still going to be receiving credit on campus, so still receiving credit for the experience.
We actually just had someone tweet in a question
Right on.
to go back to the application process, and again, they wanted to know what the grade requirements were, but again, talking about the requirements from the student side.
Sure. So we, like I said, 2.75 GPA in terms of the expected grade point average, but there's some flexibility there depending on individual situations and ability to provide that third letter of recommendation. In terms of the application itself, it's a fairly straightforward application form with basic information about you and your career interests. But then in addition to that, we ask for a resume, the 2 letters of recommendation I mentioned, or 3 in the event that your GPA is a little bit lower than the 2.75. A transcript from your university, so you need to get that through the University of Findlay, and then 2 different essays, 2 written statements. One of those is a 100-word statement of professional interest. It basically talks a little bit about what you hope to do with your career, and you can specifically talk a bit about what you'd like to get from an internship experience. So that's a really great opportunity to sort of introduce yourself to internship sites who will be observing you for the first time through written materials. And the second essay is a bit longer. It's about 500 words. It's called an issues essay. And that's going to focus more on a topic or issue that matters to you, the person writing the essay. And you really want to pick something, I think, that is relevant to your career interest. It doesn't have to be necessarily specific to one organization, and really shouldn't be, because these materials will go out to many different organizations as part of the referral process. But you want to pick something that's relevant to the career interest, that matters to you, and really take a stand for or against that issue. The idea there is that the sites get to see a bit about what really matters to you, see a bit about the way you think and how well you write, and a lot of things like that. So it's a really important piece of the application.
I mean, communication skills are very viable and something that can be important to a lot of employers. So
Absolutely.
Having students be able to prove that they have those skills will obviously help no matter what.
Yep.
So obviously, if we have a traditional undergrad student that are interested and they meet the qualifications, they can definitely come see myself or start the process on twc.edu. What about maybe non-traditional? So we have international students that are on campus, but then also a student that might be graduating in the spring. What kind of opportunities do the Washington Center offer for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So the great news for international students is that when you attend a university in the U.S., and so in this case, the University of Findlay, as far as we're concerned, you're a domestic student because you're enrolled at a U.S. university.
Absolutely.
So you can apply and participate just like any other student from the United States can apply and participate. As for students who are nearing their graduation date, maybe this spring is the second semester of a senior year, and you're getting ready to be on the way out the door, You have a couple of different options. Some students choose to extend graduation because they prefer to participate as an enrolled undergraduate, and they want to participate in our traditional undergraduate program. Other students can choose to participate in our DC Link program. And what DC Link is it's an opportunity for recent graduates to participate in what is a very similar program with a couple of important distinctions. Those being that whereas our regular program participants take an academic course, you wouldn't do that as a DC Link participant. And your professional programming is really more focused on career development and job opportunities and the jobs you're going to be applying for probably throughout your time in DC and then soon after you finish with the Washington Center. And we also try to increase networking and mentorship opportunities for you as well. So that's really important to us. We want to, for those students who've just graduated, we really want to kind of turn the attention toward next steps after the Washington Center portion of your time is over.
Perfect. We had another question tweeted into us. A viewer wanted to know, what is city life like in DC?
City life in DC. DC is a great city.
It is.
Yeah,
It is.
Yeah, Phil, you
I was
came
there.
out to visit and
I took my 8th grade trip like most individuals.
Right.
So I had that memory in my mind, and
Yeah.
then going there as a not an 8th grader anymore to kind of experience it on that side of things, it offers a lot.
Absolutely. No, I think DC is a great place to live. It's it's a city that's flush with unique neighborhoods, great places to go out and grab a bite to eat. There's always something to do and see in Washington. Couple of highlights that I'll mention. One of the things I love is that everyone in DC seems to be from someplace else. I'm originally from the Cleveland area, and I've got friends who are from Texas originally, Florida, New Hampshire, Montana, all over the country. And it's you meet people from all sorts of different places who've had different experiences growing up and can really add a lot of flavor to your life and your experience in Washington. And one of the other things that I think is great about DC is that there's so much going on and so much of it is free. One of the great things about Washington is that all the Smithsonian museums and many of the different festivals and events that take place, they're at no cost to the participants. So while DC is certainly a bit more expensive than Findlay, Ohio, you can actually do a lot there and have a really active social life without spending a whole lot to take on those experiences, which is one of the things I think a lot of people, especially when you're interning and you're kind of trying to make it for a summer while you're in school, that it's really appreciated.
So what would you recommend to a student if they would ask how much money should they bring, to be able to do the other things in DC outside of the internship and what the Washington Center kind of gives them?
Sure. We usually recommend budgeting between $150 and $250 a week, and that really reflects the individual aspect of budgeting. So I think every participant makes a lifestyle choice. If you choose to eat out for lunch every day, you're going to spend more money. You can spend easy $10, $12 a day on lunch in Washington, and that can add up very quickly. But if you're someone who goes to the grocery store, maybe you collaborate with roommates to buy groceries and cook dinner, and you pack a lunch, and you're selective about where you spend money, you can definitely do it on the cheap and be a little bit more conservative. You're going to have some fixed costs. Everybody has to get around DC, and we all use public transportation for that, which it makes it very easy to get around, but does cost you a little bit. But otherwise, you can really be selective and trim back in certain areas.
So we had another Twitter question. They wanted to know what are the length of time for the internships?
Great question. In the summer, participants are out in DC for 10 weeks, so that usually runs from the end of May, beginning of June, to the beginning to middle of August, depending on which of the start dates you go with. And then during the semesters, we follow a fairly typical semester schedule. Late August, early September through early December, and then late January through late April, early May.
So the actual length of time almost matches directly with the university's.
Right, 15 weeks in the spring and fall and 10 weeks in the summer.
Because when we've had students go, it almost aligns exactly with our actual summer, fall, and spring schedules. So
right.
It makes it
it works
really
well.
easy.
And actually, while we're talking about length of time, I'll take a minute to mention another opportunity that we have, and they're actually some short-term and intensive opportunities. We call them academic seminars, and they are offered every year. We usually offer a seminar every year in January and another in May. And they tend to focus on a particular issue area, usually something that's of interest to a specific group of students. So in January, our seminar is usually called Inside Washington and tends to focus more on the political dynamics at play in DC, some connections with the media and things like that. And in May, our typical seminar is called National Security and focuses very specifically on national security issues. It's 2016 and it's the presidential election year, so this is sort of a unique year for us, and we actually are running a special seminar series that we've been running since 1984. They're called our campaign seminars, and we started with Inside Washington in January, and that was focused on the upcoming presidential election. This summer, we're going to actually have our only programs that are run outside of Washington, D.C. We'll have 2 convention seminars on location at the DNC and the RNC in Philadelphia and Cleveland, respectively. And then next January, we'll have our Inside Washington seminar focus on the presidential inauguration. So for students who are interested in the opportunity to have a short-term experience that focuses very intensely, where you learn a lot about these things as they're happening, where you get the chance to witness history in the making, and also the chance to be a part of it because of some unique opportunities for field work, especially at the convention sites. These seminars as part of the campaign series are a really, really unique opportunity. Still worth credit, though it's not required, and a really, really great way to get involved.
No, I agree. And the more that I learn about the Washington Center and the evolution of, again, this relationship and this partnership with what we're trying to create, and the university, from our standpoint, experiential learning is a big deal. It's something that we want every student to have multiple opportunities for. So I think what you guys have to offer, is very unique.
Yeah.
When we have students that want to go maybe to bigger city, housing is always an issue.
Right.
To have that be part of the the equation with this, and to be able to give them other opportunities outside their traditional internship is definitely valuable. Really at this point, we've given a lot of information.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you feel like we haven't really touched on that you've received questions a lot about when you interact with students? Or
I think we've covered a lot of basics. I'll say, reflecting on what you just said, I think that there are lots of ways to get professional experience, and
Absolutely.
there's not necessarily one right or wrong way to do it. So this is just one of many options that's available to students at the University of Findlay. But I think it's certainly, like you said, it's unique in the sense that you don't often get the chance to immerse yourself wholly in a professional experience. If you intern locally, maybe you intern in downtown Findlay or up in Toledo or down in Columbus, you might dip in and out of an internship a few days a week. But ultimately, if you go home or you go back to campus, you're still only living professionally part of the time. When you come to Washington and you dip into a professional experience like this, you're going in 100%,
Absolutely.
diving in head over heels, and you really have the chance to live, learn, work professionally. And there's something unique about that. I think it was really tremendously impactful for me to do that sort of thing, and I think that's really what sets experiences like this apart.
Absolutely. So there's obviously deadlines with applications.
Yep. Yeah.
Where are we at with those, and what should students know as far as how much time they have before they need to?
Well, still plenty of time to apply for summer opportunities at the Washington Center, as well as the convention programs that I mentioned. Convention deadlines are March 1st, and the summer opportunities for the Washington Center, we have 2 deadlines. One is in February and one is in March. If you apply early, you've got a little bit of a leg up in terms of internship matching, and you also get priority consideration for private financial support if that's something you're hoping for. And then for the fall and next spring, still plenty of time. Our fall deadlines are late spring, so May and June, and then our spring deadlines are always in mid-fall, October and November.
And I'm assuming there's competition, correct? You have a lot of students that attend the Washington Center, but then in general,
Right.
DC is a hub for interns.
Yeah,
I know you've told me the stat before about how many are there during the summer, and interns in general, but
Yeah, I think a couple years ago, Politico, which is a newspaper in D.C., quoted as saying there are about 20,000 interns in Washington that summer. And summer's definitely a pretty busy time for internships in Washington. So, definitely some competition, but that's part of the advantage of applying to a program like ours, is that we help you with your application materials. We really help you prepare for interviews and for those sorts of opportunities. And we're going to help you match with some of the placements that you might not have known about or might not hear about if you weren't working with an organization like ours that's already tapped into a network in the city.
absolutely. So earlier the better.
Right.
Again, if students have questions, they can definitely reach out to you if they have your contact.
Absolutely.
To myself as well.
Yeah.
As things are always changing, always moving in a positive way, I
Yep.
believe, with this relationship, and I'm really excited to see, how we can evolve it and make it open and available to more students.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think you mentioned before our web address is www.twc.edu, but if you're watching and you've got questions, you want to find out more, that's a great place to start. Plenty of contact info there as well if you want to get a hold of us. And Phil, you're located in Old Main, right?
Yeah, so Old Main in room 113, which is right by the business window, and I always say it's easy to know because that's where everyone pays their bills. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to stop by. But so you can also email me. My email is just my last name, gunder@findlay.edu. You can set up a time. Reed will be here the rest of today, but then also on campus tomorrow and
That's right.
in some classrooms. And if you want to ask him some specific questions, he's definitely here for that. So.
Happy to fill up the cracks between classes.
That's right. Hey,
Thanks very much.
I appreciate it.
Great.
This has been fun, and
Been
looking
great.
forward
Been a lot of
to more shows to come. So thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Yep.